Wild Tales is a 2014 co-production between Argentina and Spain. It's an anthology film made up of 6 unrelated short stories, but they each share similar themes of catharsis and violence and revenge. Every story has a character being pushed to their limits, and like animals in a cage, when pushed to emotional extremes and distress, they sometimes bite back. Wild Tales is a black comedy. It's very twisted, and it's very funny. But since these are all short stories, I'm just gonna go ahead and jump right into spoilers and summarize each one before I give my final thoughts on the complete film. So yeah, spoilers. The first story takes place on an airplane. A model and a music critic are making small talk when they realize that they both have a common acquaintance. What starts off as an unusual coincidence becomes unbelievable when another woman is familiar with this person they're talking about, and as bizarre as it is, it becomes quite disturbing and alarming since it seems every single person on this plane has wronged this character in some way, and that nobody on this flight was here of their own volition. Then one of the flight attendants, horrified, reveals that this man is the pilot for this flight and that he has locked himself in the cockpit. As the plane starts to nosedive towards the city, his previous therapist tries reasoning with him, explaining that none of his shortcomings are his fault, that his parents are to blame. And we cut to his parents, with an airplane quickly approaching them. The second story takes place in a quiet restaurant, with a single customer entering during a rainstorm. The waitress silently recognizes him and returns to the kitchen in immediate distress, because the man who entered is a loan shark that was directly responsible for her father's suicide. The chef is quick to suggest slipping rat poison into his food, which is totally out of the question, but as the minutes go by, the cook seems more and more set on killing this scumbag. And she decides she doesn't exactly need permission. The waitress unwittingly brings the customer his final meal, but once she realizes what has happened, she starts struggling with the ethics of killing somebody. But then his son shows up and starts eating the tainted food as well, and everything very quickly gets out of hand, and ultimately, one way or the other, the evil bastard ends up getting what's coming to him. The third story starts off a bit like a car advertisement, with some of the glamorous shots that it has. The gentleman driving it seems to be a tad impatient, as he gets frustrated by some redneck that's in his way, and as he tries to pass, he repeatedly gets cut off. When he does eventually make his way around, he insults the man, flips him off, and continues on his merry way. Fate would have it, his beautiful car gets a flat tire and he's forced to pull over alongside a bridge to try and make repairs. But it's only a matter of time before he's reunited with his old friend, and he pulls over, but not to apologize and hug it out. No, he defecates all over his car and smashes up the windshield, and well, they get into a physical altercation, and they start trying to kill each other. It's an amusing and ridiculous fight that's drawn out, and in the end, they both wind up burning alive. It's cute. The fourth story is about a demolition expert that is just wrapping up a job before going out to get cake for his daughter's birthday party that evening. While in the shop, his car gets towed, despite the fact that the spot he parked wasn't marked as a no parking zone. This event has an explosive impact on his life. He enters a huge battle with the towing company, and his wife tells him that she wants a divorce. He never takes responsibility, he isn't there for them, and he's always casting blame on society. He has a complete downward spiral. He gets into trouble with the law, he loses his job, and he becomes obsessed with being compensated by the corrupt fascists that are stealing time and money from innocent people like himself. Once he hits rock bottom, he decides to use his expertise to get revenge, by blowing up his car after it gets towed again. This one honestly could have ended here, but it's a little funny. He becomes a hero for the people, and it has this huge domino effect. And it ends with his family visiting him in prison, now totally forgiven and with obvious affection, and everyone is happy. I guess not every story needs to end with a few people burning to death. The fifth story starts off right after a hit and run, with a car pulling into a garage with a damaged, bloody license plate. It turns out the son of a rich couple had just run over a pregnant woman, and the family frantically tries to figure out how to cover up the situation before authorities are able to track down the vehicle's owner. The father comes up with a scheme to bribe his caretaker $500,000 to take responsibility for the tragedy. But then the prosecutor investigating the family starts doing too good of a job, and they'll need to bribe him as well. And then his lawyer wants a handout, and he realizes he's being extorted by everyone involved. When he puts his foot down, they have to quickly scramble to renegotiate terms and figure out whether or not the deal is on or off. And finally, when everything gets settled, the poor caretaker taking the fall gets bludgeoned to death by a man seeking revenge. The sixth and final story finishes this whole thing with a celebratory bang. It ends with an awesome wedding. But on the happiest day of the bride's life, she catches something she isn't supposed to. A flash of awkward intimacy between her freshly married husband and his female coworker. She has a suspicion from earlier and decides to test if a phone number he had previously lied about happens to be her number. And she's right. When she quietly confronts him on the dance floor, he eventually confesses, and she runs out of there, sobbing uncontrollably, and she makes her way to the roof. An employee that was trying to enjoy a smoke break shows her a great deal of kindness and comfort, and swept up in her emotions, she repays him by sleeping with him. It's at this point that she turns from sorrow to rage. She's going to rain vengeance down upon him. She returns to the party, starts dancing and having a ball. And she throws the other woman through a mirror. She humiliates her husband, she gets into a fight with his mother, and the whole thing is a complete disaster. But at both of their lowest points, he asks his wife for a dance, and they kiss, and they make love in front of everybody they know. So those are the 6 wild tales. The quality of the whole movie is based on 6 completely different segments, and thank God, every single one of them is better than the last, in one way or another. Wild Tales is certainly 6 for 6, and if you were to remove them individually, and release them each as short films, every single one would be praised on its own merits. But this isn't just a collection of short stories, it's an anthology film with a theme, and they're all building off each other to make a satisfying and well-balanced final product. While the first 3 stories are all very snappy, very direct, and very primal, there's this magnificent sense of escalation in these stories. It's masterful filmmaking with all of these stories, but they don't all feel exactly the same. The final 3 chapters are a bit longer, a bit slower, and with a much smaller sense of actual danger. The movie turns from being a dark thriller to being a dark comedy, or a dark drama. The 4th and the 5th stories are much more focused on social injustice and corruption. These stories are still really, really good on their own, but once you're halfway through this movie, the pacing dips a bit. But does it negatively affect the movie? Well, it might make the second half a tiny bit harder to sit through, maybe just from fatigue, but I think every single story is just great. I like them all nearly equally, and I think it's an easy claim that Wild Tales is up there with one of the best anthology films ever made.